10 years ago, a state government in Australia awarded a 99-year lease of a port to a foreign company. The firm was Landbridge, one of China's biggest port and logistics conglomerates, which has an interest in the Panama Canal. The port was Darwin, part of Australia's most strategic military infrastructure in the north, and the lease was for 100% operations and 80% ownership. Now, with an election looming, Australian political parties say they will retake the port in the interests of national security. Take a look.
An elected coalition government will move immediately to secure the Darwin Port. The position has only deteriorated, and we've now seen, of course, the circumnavigating of our country by Chinese naval ships.
And with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese also pledging that Australia will take back control, China isn't happy. Watch.
我们敦促澳方切实为中国企业在澳的投资运营提供公平、非歧视、可预期的营商环境，不要泛化国家安全概念。 不要把正常的商业合作政治化。
Why is Darwin Port leased to a Chinese firm until the year 2114? What are Landbridge's connections to the CCP? And why is it vital that Australia take the port back? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. Joining us today are Ye Su, National Chengchi University Department of Political Science Professor, and Raymond Sung, Prospect Foundation Vice President. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show today. While the deal passed Australian Defence Department and Australian Security Intelligence Organisation checks a decade ago, one Australian analyst speaking to ABC Australia said their focus had been more on the risks of covert surveillance at the port rather than the bigger picture of strategic influence by a hostile foreign state over Australian critical infrastructure. However, in 2021, there was a recommendation by an Australian federal government parliamentary committee to break the 99-year lease, which was followed by a government review in 2022. But in 2023, ahead of a visit to Beijing, the current government announced it would not strip Landbridge of its lease. But here we are 2 years later, with both Dutton and Albanese saying they want to take Darwin back. To what extent do you think they were influenced by Donald Trump and Panama Canal, where basically two ports at either end are controlled by a Hong Kong-based company?
Well, I think to some extent, not because they might receive pressure from the U.S., but actually they really perceive China as a kind of potential threat to the regional security. In Darwin, it is a very important port. It has strategic and economic importance at the crossroads of Indo-Pacific. And its strategic location reduces shipping times in Asia, and also it is home to many naval bases and also home to 2,500 U.S. Marine troops. It's a very important issue, and then they must make such a statement during the campaign.
And Raymond, would you agree with that? I mean, Trump's rhetoric was very strong on Panama, obviously. We gave it to Panama, not to China. We don't want Panama falling into the wrong hands. Do you think the Australians are looking at that and saying, we've got our own port?
I think the pointing to the direction of security concerns are parallel between Australia and the US. But in the case of Darwin, Port of Darwin, actually the debate within Australia has been a long haul for almost immediately after the concession was made in 2013. Actually, the Obama administration in the U.S. complained about that. They did not being advised beforehand.
So why do you think only now, Raymond? What do you think's triggered it now?
I think that the policy formation need to have a period of development, and especially after the security viewpoint about Chinese threats are getting grounds within Australian societies, especially when you see the Chinese infiltration to every corner, every aspect of Australia society, including the political system, including the overseas Chinese communities. And the Australian treatment Australia received after the COVID, when the Australia made the case that there should be an international investigation, and Chinese just barely waged huge economic sanctions and coercive actions against Australia. I think those changes Australians' government and society's viewpoint about the Chinese influence.
Okay, so that's sort of gradually building pressure, and now it's the tipping point. Now, Landbridge founder and chairman Ye Cheng was a member of China's 12th National Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference Committee, or China's top political advisory body, from 2013 to 2018. Ye also represents the All China Federation of Taiwan Compatriots, whose goal is unification by influencing public opinion in Taiwan. Furthermore, the body holds seats in every five-year CPPCC committee, and the secretary of Landbridge's Communist Party of China Branch Committee is Ye Cheng, an ex-PLA officer. Professor Su, what else do we know about the links between Landbridge and the CCP or the PLA?
Well, specifically, it is not that clear, but we know that for these Chinese companies, whether it is state-owned companies or the so-called private companies, because in China it is no strict, no company with a strict sense like real private companies. But we know that, from this open to public information, we know that they have a background in the CCP and also in the PLA. But what makes me wonder much more is that for these companies which operate in foreign countries, they also hire local people. So I wonder, whether there's any kind of information that the Australian government, for example, reveal that this managerial role of Australians within the companies, whether they have some kind of connection with the Chinese government or not. We cannot just focus on these two persons. If they really want to do some investigation, they really need to, take a look at these people.
So you mean perhaps the Australian CEO, that sort of level and connections with China. Raymond, so how independent do you think that Landbridge could be? Because this is the issue, isn't it? The risks, people are concerned about these companies' port operations and ownership because they do not think that they are independent.
Yeah, I think the question is about presumption, and I agree with Professor Su that in China, the big conglomerate need to be presumed to have some state backing. In either the case of capital provision or sources, or that they receive directions or being served as an instrumentality for Chinese state policy. For example, in this case, for the One Belt, One Road initiative, when the Chinese aim to have a foothold within the South Pacific and they aim at the northern territory of Australia and the port of Darwin to be a convenient point to establish their bases there. And also, curiously, that the same group, the Landbridge group, also initiated the building of a deep sea port over the Atlantic side of the Panama Canal, the same conglomerate. So you will see the linkage, and you will see that in both cases, they carry out the functions for the Chinese government, which is to develop the network of the Maritime Belt Road initiative. So we will see that it is natural that both the Australia and the US being suspicious about the spreading out of those Chinese instrumentalities.
Yeah, and because Darwin Port is actually a dual-use port, isn't it? It's got the commercial side, but it's also got the military, which we'll get onto just now. In 2011, Barack Obama, the US then president, signed off on an annual deployment of US Marines to Australia's strategic top end, the northern extremes of the country. Take a look.
Marine Rotational Force Darwin is a 6-month rotation of U.S. Marines to Australia during the Northern Territory dry season. The rotational Marine Air Ground Task Force deployment in Darwin enables U.S. Marines and the Australian Defence Force to more effectively train, exercise, and operate together in the Indo-Pacific region.
Today, up to 2,500 rotational Marines live and train every year in Darwin, increasing the US allied ability to respond to crises across the region. Professor Su, so why was Darwin itself chosen as a base for these US Marines? If you can help to explain the geography,
Well, first of all, Australia and the U.S. Signed a mutual defense treaty. The Australian government agreed to allow the U.S. to deploy troops in Australia, and Darwin connects to different region in Asia Pacific. For example, Indonesia and also Papua New Guinea, and it might have some importance to the Malacca Strait.
And Raymond, does it also help the US, as well as Australia, project force into areas like the South China Sea?
So geographically, the Port of Darwin is the closest port of Australia to the Indo-Pacific region, including the South China Sea and East China Sea. And if you consider the security viewpoint presented by the conclusion of AUKUS, the trilateral cooperation framework between Australia, UK, and the US, that actually Australia is getting the job to assist the Allies forces defense or intervention in case of anything happened, including the Taiwan contingency happening in the Pacific. So that in that case, the basis in Port of Darwin is critical. And also the second point is for the defense of Australia itself. And in the National Security Strategic Review in the consecutive years, that actually the communities of security advise the government to think about the all domain defense, especially for the defending Australia from the missile attack, that the geographical remoteness will not be automatically being providing some kind of security of that kind of attack. And also if you consider the recent deployment of Chinese naval forces into the waters between New Zealand and Australia, it is very clear that China wanted to develop its blue sea projection of this naval power. Third point is about the alternative route to Taiwan Strait. If you consider that, actually the community are thinking about in case of that Taiwan Strait, of course it's carry about 60% of the global trade toward that trade. Strait. If that was blocked, and what are the alternative routes? One is from the east of the Taiwan, or from the Philippines, east of Philippines, or into the Indo-Pacific, Indonesia archipelago. In that case, the Port of Darwin will be even more important. So consider all this, that the Chinese establish a foothold in that port location is very, very suspicious.
Yeah, very, very important point. And that probably explains, Professor Su, why the US has been building up, these northern sort of military installations throughout 2024 and 25. There are projects to, build refueling, storage, runway upgrades, hangars. And this is across, for example, the RAF's Tyndall Air Force Base. And, there are also some exercises, a lot of the interoperability exercises for the region, for the Indo-Pacific, appear to be coming out of this region. Practically speaking, Professor Su, if you can help our audience understand, what does control of Darwin Port, what does it enable China to do?
Well, first of all, during the war, it is, of course, not possible for the PLA to be deployed in the port, but there is some kind of scenario discussed if indeed there is some kind of geopolitical crisis happening. This company might do something to sort of slow down this military operation to damage the port or to close the port or something like that. It is not like they welcome PLA to the country, but they can do a lot of different things. And also, during the peacetime, they can do investigation, so for example, this, the volume of export and import and what kind of things that has been imported to the port.
Right. And Raymond, just tying into that, so obviously there's monitoring and surveillance issue. That was considered 10 years ago, and apparently the deal passed that. But can you tell us about why that is significant, why that might be significant leading up to any crisis?
I think the key word here is influence, that the Australia and U.S. being suspicious about they're being highly suspicious about Chinese having some operational directives power to those key critical infrastructures, especially maritime ports, and the possible technical interference when the cases are emergent will be significant. So any technical intervention will be need to be fended off. So that's the reason behind this high degree of suspicion about running of the operations and of certain facilities.
Right, and I was just reading about how Darwin is also central to Australia's oil and gas industry.
Yes.
And obviously Professor Su mentioned that. Do you want to
Because the Northern Territory has the access to the South Pacific waters, and there's some oil and gas explorations being going on. If that's commercially available, feasible, then there will be some potentials there. And also Darwin Port is a key position for the export of Australian minerals, including phosphate from Australia.
So Professor Su, do you see that, again, that becomes a way that China could, if there's restrictions of those exports or restrictions of imports, then this has a coercive force on Australia, which is a US ally?
Yeah. Well, I think in this globalization world, everything is linked together. From this One Belt and One Road initiative, we know that there are some other ports, for example, like Hambantota port in Sri Lanka and Cambodia. We know that some many ports are under this kind of full operation management by Chinese companies. So these taken all of these ports together, we know that it is very important that these countries start to think about that. This security issues are becoming increasingly important. Whether these ports should be taken back. Yeah.
Okay. Now, in 2015, when the Australian Northern Territory state government awarded Landbridge the Darwin lease, the security environment in the Indo-Pacific, as well as Australia-China relations, were very different compared to today. In 2014, Australia had just hosted Xi Jinping on a state visit, upgraded ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership, and signed a free trade agreement. And yet, there had been misgivings among the Australian opposition and security community. Former US President Barack Obama personally expressed dismay to then Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, saying, "Let us know next time." Raymond, you had obviously mentioned that already. How dramatic has been the change over the past decade for Australia?
Yeah, I think for the past decade, it's become clear and clear that China wanted to change the rule-based international order. And so that's the ambition that Xi Jinping or PRC has. It's a global one. It's to have a hegemony in the Indo-Pacific to draw submissions from other parties. So that's why that the parties actually, for example, G7 summit, actually Australia also participated in the meeting, issued time and time again to say that the stability of Indo-Pacific is crucial, and one crucial element is Taiwan Strait. So those are getting critically clear over the years, especially if you take the behavior patterns of China into account. Vis-a-vis Korea, with Japan, with Taiwan, India, the Philippines in the South China Sea, and Australia. And you will see that's the expansionist tendency and the rhetoric within the China about the great rejuvenation, and also about the Chinese activities in the COVID period, when that they refused to accept any requirement from the global legal framework about transparency, about data information. And if you are in the case like Australia, if you dare to speak out, then you'll be heavily punished by economic coercion. So the economic security also coming into the table. Taking all that into account, actually you will see the getting together in the Indo-Pacific area to try to put a balance to this Chinese expansionist tendency.
Yeah, so Professor Su, they're sort of taking Australia as an example, but as Raymond said, it's a pattern across the region. Could we characterize it as that shift from China as economic opportunity, sort of like the golden age of 2014, 2015, to now the shift to the US for these countries for their security, their defense?
Yeah, well, things are very complicated because of this recent tariff, so-called nuclear war initiated by Trump administration. So I think many governments right now in this region are thinking about, what to do next. If Trump administration did not initiate this kind of tariff action, I think it is very clear that this government, the region are thinking about that, it's time to think about relying on more on the U.S. side.
Yes, and good point. The U.S. does not want them to shift to the U.S. for security, but to share the burden across the region.
Right.
Now, meanwhile, on Panama, Hong Kong-based C.K. Hutchison has been subjected to a barrage of criticism in Hong Kong and Chinese state media outlets for working against Chinese national interests, following its announcement to sell the 2 Panama port operations and 40+ others globally to U.S. firm BlackRock. Beijing has also threatened to halt the country's new deals with China. While an initial deadline of April the 2nd to sign the deal with BlackRock has passed, both sides say the negotiations are ongoing. Raymond, if Hutchison actually reverses its decision to sell to BlackRock, what are the full implications of that for China?
The reason why the Chinese government being so furious about the sales of the Hutchison's control, actually for their global basis for ports operation to BlackRock, is that actually they see this actually they interfere with the Chinese game about extending Chinese control or networking within this region in Panama, in Central and America. And so in that case, it's no denial that the Hutchison's control over the 2 ports at 2 points of the Panama Canal is a piece on the chessboard of China. And if you take more widely, actually, the influence of Chinese companies and headquarters within Panama is widespread. It became, actually, back to 2017, Panama was the first in Latin America to sign the Belt and Road Initiative with China. And over the year, you see the huge, great spread of Chinese influence in Panama. And also, if you take even more widely about what China is doing in that region, including building railroads in Honduras, Nicaragua, Colombia, and also in Mexico, trying to find alternative routes to connect the 2 seas, and also trying to control the operation, some facilities of the operation in Panama Canal.
Does China need to be careful in how it reacts and going forward on both Panama Canal and Darwin Port? Because we've established through what Raymond said, obviously they are expanding their power and their control, but it's never been that explicit, is it? It's what we understand, but it's never been explicit on their side.
Yeah. Well, that is true because I think China wants to be pretty low-key. In my view, I think China doesn't want to demonstrate to the world that all the private companies in China are controlled by the CPP.
And in Hong Kong.
Oh yeah. So I think they will be very careful and also will not put strong pressures, but some pressures to the local governments because at the end, they also don't want to lose the opportunity to expand their influence. Yeah.
Right. And Raymond, if I could get your very final thoughts, in just a few seconds, we're running out of time. So in terms of setting a precedent, do you agree that China does need to be careful and choose its fights on?
The Chinese has been clever, so that's why that you need to be aware of the infiltration they've been quietly conducting over the globe. Actually, the talk we got about control of critical infrastructure, just one aspect. Other kind of extending their political maneuver within the domestic society is also very noteworthy.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to our guests, Raymond Sung and Su Yanbing, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show today, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.